Good afternoon, everybody. Are you guys having a good festival? Excellent. Very good. Please make sure to turn off all your cell phones and PDAs. This is a sacred space. The only flickering light should be coming from the stage and not from your neighboring devices. We're very fortunate to have the world premiere of A Year in Burgundy, and we have here the director, David Kennard.
Well, I'm going to try and put on a really professional face here and look as if my many years in the industry have hardened me to events like this, but I can tell you, to play a documentary in a lovely theatre like this, a real movie house, is a real thrill. I've never seen it in a house this large and on a screen like this, so it'll be a first for me too. So, enjoy.
And of course, immediately following the movie, David will be with us for a Q&A, so enjoy.
It is a great pleasure to welcome director David Kennard here in Burgundy. Thank you so much for joining us and choosing Santa Barbara as your world premiere. This has been a really fantastic screening so far at the festival. Yesterday's show was sold out at the museum, and now we're here at the packed house at the Libero, so congratulations on the film. I guess I'll start with the question of Burgundy, and there's so many amazing... Oh, did you want to introduce?
I just want to introduce Todd. Yes, this is working too. Todd Rubert is our executive producer, without whom, as they say, none of this would have happened. So,
going back to Burgundy as a region of the world, there's so many fantastic places where wine grows, including, of course, California and Santa Barbara. Why did you choose to focus on Burgundy?
Well, the sort of secret about the film really is that I wanted to do for years and years and years. I've made a number of documentaries over a huge number of years, and I really wanted to do a film about France, about the rural France, and about the whole atmosphere, which is, I find it very extraordinary. Really that, they call it the rural tissue. I mean, it means this profound sense in which they create such wonderful food, wine, and other things, and a slow evolution. So I've been looking to try and find the subject to do that, and 2 or 3 years ago came up with an idea to do a wine film, perhaps more than one wine film, which would really approach winemakers as if they were artists. But you have to find the place on earth where that works. And I then met Martine Saunier, who you see in the film, who's based in the San Francisco area, as I am too. And then I knew this is how we had to do it, because she had relationships with winemakers that go back 40 years and so on. So she could take me to the kind of people with these profound roots, people they don't know how long their family has been growing grapes and so on. You know, it's long before they could very often read or write, they were doing it. So that sense of fantastic tradition, that's why.
Now, being an Englishman, and I guess growing up in London and then moving to San Francisco, did you have any resistance? You know, I mean, I know you mentioned Martine as being a wonderful resource to get you some of the connections in Burgundy, but was there ever any resistance to talking with an Englishman who's making a film from California?
Well, you know, the French are quite tolerant of the English, really, largely because millions, it seems, but certainly hundreds of thousands of English people have a second home in France, and there are some French villages which are more English than French, it seems, somehow. So they put up with us, even though they think we're faintly ludicrous. We think that about them too, so, you know, what do I say? You know? So there is this, you know, long, curious sort of relationship, but what they found very interesting was that we were willing to spend the time. You know, we made 4 trips and spent a lot of time making this, often 2 camera shoots and up at dawn, and there are many other scenes which aren't in the film. And the main thing, I think, which they came to appreciate was that we were willing to spend the time and listen. And eventually, the secret for any documentary maker is to be there like a fly on the wall, you know. Eventually speaking, you're one of the family. They don't bother that you're there. So when the machine breaks down, or they're panicked by a hailstorm, or they're serving lunch to 27 people, you're going to be number 28 and number 29, you know. And that is, for me, the treasure of documentary making, is to become part of the people who you're trying to portray, to try and the greatest pleasure is, very often, to show a film like this to the people who've helped make it and then feel that they're really happy about it. And even if you show some sides to them they haven't seen quite before, it's the ultimate acid test, is if you can show it to them.
Well, there's a very organic feel to it, and I think in parts, you know, you really feel like you're integrated very closely with the community of winemakers that you focus on. When you went to Burgundy, you know, did you have a plan? Did it start off on, you know, this day we're going to meet with these winemakers, we're going to go to this restaurant, we're going to focus on this, or did it just kind of evolve through serendipity and chance and the same way that the winemaking process works?
Making films is very much like making wine, it turned out eventually. You think you've got everything planned and then everything changes at the last minute. I arrived on the first trip thinking I was just doing a scouting trip, and at the last minute, our senior cameraman, Jamie Lejeune, said to me, "Take a camera, you never know." And when I arrived, Martine met me off the TGV, the fast train from Paris, and she said, "Oh, David," she said, "we have to go and film it now. It's fantastic, pale light on all the chateaus." And I said, "Martine, I've got jet lag, I've just arrived, come on, what do you mean?" She said, "No, it'll never be as good as this." So she gets me in her car. She does have a fast one apart from the Deux Chevaux. This is her second one. And she drives me to some of the first images you see in the film, which we shot the very first evening. I wasn't even meant to be shooting. I didn't even have a tripod with me, you know. I mean, I was going to be taking notes with this camera. So almost the whole of the spring section of this film was filmed by me without a tripod and no planning in advance whatsoever. And she said, "Oh, we have to do this because we're so far in advance now, you know, they're all very worried, we'll lose the whole thing, you'll never get this story again." So we kind of started off, you know, like in a panic, and had to keep running to catch up with ourselves, really, in the events. Whatever they tell you at film school, folks, that's the reality.
Well, it's certainly a very beautiful film. You can tell that you have a lot of care into every single image is shot with a very focus on detail and care, and you have many layers to the story. So I think it's one of the attributes, one of the qualities of the film is that it's very accessible, and yet there's enough, you know, really amazing things for people who know a lot about wine to kind of sink their teeth into. So I think you did a really great job on that.
Thank you.
Also, I was gonna, when we spoke yesterday after this first screening, you have a connection to Santa Barbara with John Cleese, and I know that you've made some films.
Well, the first wine film I made was with John about 7 or 8 years ago, about the same time as Sideways was being shot. And John Cleese of Monty Python and many other things has and I have a mutual friend. And it so happened that soon after he'd moved pretty full-time to Santa Barbara, he was approached by the Food Channel, who'd heard he'd come to Santa Barbara, and some bright spark said, "Oh, right, somebody's right, you know, let's ask him to do a film about wine." So he met me and he called me, and I had a young intern working with me, and, you know, being English, I do love facetious humor, you know, it goes with the territory. I have to keep cutting silly jokes out of the script, you understand, to make it a serious film. And it's John Cleese on the phone, and this intern thought it was me, and she said, "Oh, come on," and it did turn out to be John Cleese on the phone, and he said, "The Food Channel has approached us, and would you like to work with me on this?" And he said, the first joke, he said, is the size of the budget, so he told me the size of the budget. And he said, "But, you know, you can come and I'm sure we can shoot the whole thing in 10 days, and you can stay with me and keep the crew small and we'll have fun." So we did, and it came out on the Food Channel. It's called John Cleese's Wine for the Confused, and DVDs are still available, so you want them. But this is the project which we're pushing now. So. Anyway, there we are. It was a kind of a humorous view of wine, but you actually learn a lot, so like Wine for the Beginners and stuff. And it was all shot around here in Santa Ynez, Los Olivos Grocery, Santa Maria, just down the road, Montecito, you know. Look for the film.
And you mentioned that this was the first film of a trilogy that you're working on.
Well, Todd, this is where I should ask, do you want to come and say hello to everyone on the microphone? Right. Todd Ruppert is the man behind, you know, The Wizard of Oz. If I may say one thing about this, the fact that this film exists at all was the most amazing piece of serendipity. Martine Saunier, who I'd met, we said, well, look, we want to find some finance for this film. Martine met you, Todd, I think, at a Thanksgiving dinner. So can I hand you this? What did she say to you to have you say, oh?
Well, first of all, I don't deserve to be up here next to this gentleman. Yeah, I met Martine at Blackberry Farm. And my wife and I and 2 daughters have been going to Blackberry Farm for over a decade. We were very, very, very close with the family. And the family invites us in for Thanksgiving dinner, and who else is there but Martine? Martine sees that we love Blackberry, we love the family loves Martine. Martine's one of her favorite places on earth is Blackberry Farm. And we had a wonderful evening, and at the end of the evening she asked if she could go for a walk with me the next morning, and I said sure. And she told me about this idea, and I said, who's the filmmaker? Oh, David. And on the spot I said, sure, I'll finance it. And the nice thing about doing this is the honor and privilege of working with 2 incredibly gifted people in David and Martine, and 2 incredibly nice people. And I think the concept here, what I thought was wonderful, is they harmonized all this. We got to meet all of the magicians, but left in the magic. And it was fun to be part of that. And I'm excited that we're not just doing one film, but we're building a brand, and there may be more than 3. So.
You heard it here first, but I heard it here first too. More than I. Oh, right. Okay, we have witnesses. Yeah. Anyway, the next 2 films, which is tremendously exciting for us. I mean, I have to just say about Todd, I could not wish for, and you know, miracles do happen. Todd appreciates what we're making the film about, and has done 2 things. 1, encourage us, and 2, not get involved until we ask him to, when he has a look and he gives us a couple of comments, and they're always good and interesting, and thank you. The next 2 films, which we're already well on the way on, the Champagne film is going to be a year in Champagne. We've shot almost everything, except we are going to have a champagne tasting. Can't give away too much, but it has a deep connection to Winston Churchill. And the curious fact that during World War II, at exactly the same time, Churchill was busily trying to stay in the war and keep Britain in the war before the US joined, sustained, shall we say, by a certain amount of both cognac and champagne. And at the same time, the Nazis had invaded France, and they were doing their best to ship all the champagne of the Champagne district back to Hitler's friends. Well, I'm happy to say that the Champagne people went to great and extraordinary lengths to ensure that the champagne that went back to Berlin was about the 4th or 5th level of champagne. Whole false walls were erected in vast cellars, and it's an extraordinary story. Stay around for it. We hope to bring the Champagne film to the Santa Barbara Film Festival in the future, maybe next year. And then after that, it's the Port film, which we're doing, which is a year in Port Country. We haven't quite worked out that title, but that's another extraordinary, extraordinary story, both history and culture. I don't know if you've ever been to the Douro Valley. I mean, I love Santa Barbara. I live in California. It's all great, but I have to say that's a World Heritage area, the Douro Valley and the ancient city of Oporto, and the story behind why the English have anything whatsoever to do with wines from Iberia generally is one of those bizarre stories which we hope to tell.
Well, we hope to have those films at the festival in the future, so please do keep us posted. We're going to open up questions for the audience. Yes, sir?
I just want to say to both of you gentlemen that I don't think I'll ever drink a bottle of wine or a glass of wine and think about it quite in the same way again. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I hope that it made it nicer for you rather than... Okay, fine, just checking. I don't know, shall we repeat the questions? Okay, this gentleman said he didn't think he would ever drink a glass of wine and feel the same way about it, but we did establish it was a positive thing.
Could you kindly speak a little bit about the production process and also the post-production process? For example, how many people were involved in the field actually filming and recording and so on?
Well, if you scrutinize the end credits, you'll see that we had to kind of slightly pad them out to give them any substance whatsoever, because the film really is made by 3 people. And so we had to find different sort of titles for us, and we did thank several people who wouldn't always be in the end title. So it's really made by me and Martine and Jamie Lejeune, who's camera, primary camera, second editor, and one of the producers, and me. And I did quite a lot on the film. And Martine has had this key role of being senior producer. So, for example, one production, tiny production story, during production, during the harvest, we had to split up into 2 one-man teams. So I was doing camera, sound, and lights with the people whose machine breaks down. You know, they get their batard in and all the rest of it. And absolutely, I promise you, they pushed the button and it went. And I wasn't shooting. I was actually, had got a halogen work lamp, which was the only other light I could get round the back of the batard to make it look golden and gorgeous. You know, when we say it's grape juice and all this stuff. Actually, it looked disgusting. It looked lit the way it was, so I thought, I've got to get a magic light behind there. And I suddenly realized that the machine under which it was dripping down was dead. And they were scratching their heads and getting out bits of paper and kicking it and stuff like this, you know. Wilmers, the German company which makes that machine, is not going to be terribly excited by that sequence, I can tell you. Basically, they had to reboot the whole damn thing. So I was doing that, while another one-man band, Jamie Lejeune, was doing camera, sound, and lights with the whole sequence of the guy who is raided by the police, which Jamie was running in after him, actually carrying a light under one arm, shooting at the same time, and trying to think where his microphone was and hoping it was plugged in and stuff like that. So I have to say that ideas that we would have, you know, lots of boom swingers and, you know, all these people standing by saying, can we have that spontaneous shot, take 4, go? You know, it wasn't like that.
What is your favorite Burgundy after all this?
Oh, Todd, that is a question for you.
Oh, no, I can't, that would be inappropriate.
No.
How can you not like what Malou does? I mean, across the board, she's amazing. But go ahead, you might have a different one. Different favorite.
I think the big issue for Burgundy is just that, and the big fascination that we're finding with this film is that, you know, interest in China, for example, is just going off the map. Now, the Chinese discovered Bordeaux first, and I understand now that the Chinese are right into discovering Burgundy, which the good news is the Chinese, and the bad news is the Chinese, because prices and availability and etc., they've had 3 years in a row of small but excellent harvests. But small means costs going this direction. So I would say for anybody, it is still possible to find really nice Burgundy wine without mortgaging your house. But the thing to do is not to go for the very famous names of villages or of anything else. But, you know, keep your ear close to the ground, and particularly, I would say, look for things in the Mâcon region, which is Puy-Frisé and so on, and also look for things around just north of Beaune, Savigny-les-Beaunes and around there. You can still find lovely, lovely Burgundies, but just forget the famous names if you still want to have, you know, anything left in your wallet afterwards.
I really thought the music set tone very nicely in the film. Can you talk a little bit about your ideas behind the sound of music?
Thank you. This was saying that the music was important. Well, what I really wanted to do here was to make a very old-fashioned film. And this idea came very early on. You know, I just sort of wanted to make a sort of like a storybook film, which would be in 4 chapters, which would be spring, summer, and so on. Like Vivaldi's 4 Seasons, and actually make a film which wasn't in a hurry. I mean, you know, sometimes people say, oh, I sat around for 35 seconds before anything happened, just watching drops of rain fall on a vine leaf. You know, what is going on? You say, yes, because you have to be patient to make wine. You know. And part of that was the music. And it seemed very right to use a lot of piano. And of course we do use orchestral pieces and so on, but the individual piano was terribly, terribly important. It's that single vision, it's that single person playing. But of course the key thing is that the person playing that music, half the music, is actually composed by, as well as played by, Thibaut Morey, who you see playing the piano there. And he composed 3 completely new pieces for us. He was going to go into the Conservatory of Music in Paris. And at the very last minute, he decided he actually was going to stick with the family winery, but he still plays and he composes, and he composed these 3 pieces for us, as well as playing Chopin. And actually, some of the pieces of Chopin's are played by Peter Grunberg, who's the piano player with the San Francisco Symphony, with whom we did several films in past years. But it was that business of trying to make it so simple, like the structure of the film, sort of quiet, season by season. The Independent, the newspaper here, made a point to, which is reflected in their festival edition and so on, which I'd never thought about. They said, it's kind of like a wildlife film. You kind of see, you know, what the polar bears are doing in the winter and what the polar bears are doing in the summer, and you gradually perceive it. I thought, I hadn't seen it like that. That's how the Independent sees it.
Yes?
I know Martine introduced you to a lot of the winemakers. Can you talk about the choices you made and who you were going to interview and which ones chose you?
So the question is, why did we pick those winemakers? Martine introduced us. Actually, you're right. She introduced us to at least 3 or 4 other ones who we didn't pick. And now you're asking me to tell you why we didn't pick them. Well, one had terrible halitosis, the other was... I mean, you never quite know. I mean, it has to be, it's like an affair. That's the way the French would put it, that's right. I suddenly thought how they would answer the question, you know. It's like, you know, you have to want to do, excuse me ladies, but you have to want to do it with them and they have to want to do it with you, you know, if it's going to be any sort of good outcome. And they have to think about that too. We did film scenes with some other winemakers, or more scenes with 1 or 2 of these winemakers. And the scenes just, they're fine, you know. I mean, if we needed to pad the film out by another 5 minutes, I can think of 2 or 3 scenes. Well, there's still 2 or 3 scenes I'd love to put in the film, but with 1 or 2 winemakers, who I won't give names, you know, they're really nice, but it's not quite interesting enough or magic enough. And this, when you think about it, it's so unfair, that, because what you're asking for people to be is superb winemakers, and at the same time, tremendously interesting. Now, I know a lot of tremendously interesting people who are useless at most things other than being tremendously interesting. And equally, a number of people who are fantastic at something, but really, you know, you prefer to watch paint dry rather than actually spend an entire weekend with them, you know. So you're trying to find that magic combination, you know, that magic combination, like the Morey-Coffinet family generally. And, you know, if you were casting, you'd say, yeah, and we want 2 sets of grandparents, both of whom make wine and are charming and fun. Oh, and how about throwing in a 2-year-old girl as well? Oh, you have a 2-year-old girl as well. Oh, that'll be fine. Let's do the enchanting summer Sunday lunch, you know. And it doesn't always work out like that.
I guess one more question. Yes.
You started out with the roots being from the church, about the monks in the abbeys, about making wine. But did you go to them, and are they still making wine?
No,
or,
no, they're not. This has got to be, I know I can see the hook coming out now. It's the kind of, we have 5 more films to see tonight in this theatre. Get off, go. So, the French had the French Revolution, is what stopped all that. And one of the things the French Revolution did was basically chase all monks out of their monasteries and chase all of the, quotes, established Catholic Church of France. So that completely changed everything. Now, some of the monks have gone back. There is remarkably little wine production by monks now. In fact, some of them produce honey and beer and other things which you think, what are you doing here in Burgundy? But, so at Cluny and other very famous places, because of course the Burgundy area we could have gone into in great detail, is full of some very famous places in the history of Catholicism and places where people still go for retreats and yada yada. But they don't seem to be touching the wine production anymore. I was looking for that story. I was looking for current Cistercians. I was looking for, you know, I thought, oh yes, this is a good example of how you can have one film in your head and when you get there, it's not like that at all.
Thank you.